She was invisible in that corner diner booth, exactly how she needed to be. Then the city's most dangerous mafia boss walked in and sat down beside her. Now, everyone who wants to hurt him is coming for her. What she doesn't know, she saved him once, a lifetime ago. And he never forgets a debt. The rain hammered against the diner windows like angry fists. Mira Chen sat in the back corner booth, the one with the torn vinyl seat that nobody wanted. Her fingers trembled slightly as she lifted the spoon to her lips, tasting the watery tomato soup she'd ordered because it was the cheapest thing on the menu. $3.47. She'd counted twice. The clock above the counter read 11:43 p.m. Her second shift at Wang's laundromat had ended 20 minutes ago, and her feet throbbed in her worn sneakers. But she couldn't go home yet. Not to that cold apartment with its flickering lights and the eviction notice she'd hidden under the couch cushion so Leo wouldn't see it. Here, at least, it was warm. Can you believe she comes in here looking like that? The voice carried from 3 booths away. Mira didn't look up. She'd learned not to. Probably hasn't showered in days. Another voice added, followed by cruel laughter. The group of college kids had been there for an hour, their table covered with half-eaten burgers and expensive coffee drinks. Designer jackets hung on their chairs. One of them had complained loudly that her latte wasn't hot enough, and old Frank behind the counter had made her a new one without charging extra. Mira had asked for a glass of water, and he'd acted like she'd requested champagne. She kept her eyes on her soup, watching a small piece of carrot float in circles. Tomorrow she'd work the morning shift at the laundromat, then clean Mrs. Patterson's house, then pick up Leo from the after-school program before they kicked him out for late pickup again. Somewhere in between, she needed to figure out how to make $68 appear out of thin air for the electricity bill. The diner door's bell chimed. Mira didn't look up at first. People came and went. That was the nature of a 24-hour diner in the city's forgotten district, where the neon signs flickered and the streetlights worked only half the time. But then the noise stopped. Not gradually. All at once. The college kids' laughter cut off mid-sentence. Frank's radio, always playing classic rock, seemed to fade into nothing. Even the rain sounded distant. Myra's head lifted. 3 men stood in the doorway, water dripping from their dark coats. But it was the man in the center who made her breath catch. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with sharp features that could have been carved from marble. His black hair was pushed back, slightly wet from the rain, and his eyes, cold, calculating eyes, swept across the diner with a kind of authority that didn't need to announce itself. He wore a suit that probably cost more than Mira made in 6 months. Mr. Ivanov, Frank stammered from behind the counter, his face pale. We weren't expecting. The man held up one hand, and Frank's words died in his throat.
Viktor Ivanov.
Mira knew the name the way everyone in this city knew it. You heard it in whispers, in warnings, the kind of name that made people cross the street or suddenly remember they had somewhere else to be. He was the man who controlled the Eastern District, the one the police couldn't touch, the one even other criminals feared. And he was walking toward her. Myra's heart hammered against her ribs. She pressed herself back against the booth, her hand instinctively clutching her small purse against her chest. Maybe he was heading to the booth behind her. Maybe. He stopped at her table. Is this seat taken? His voice was surprisingly quiet, measured, almost gentle. Myra's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Behind him, his 2 men stood perfectly still, their faces unreadable. One of them looked confused, his eyes darting between Victor and Mira as if trying to solve an impossible equation. I know, but Mira managed. Victor sat down, not across from her, beside her in the booth, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and woody that didn't belong in a place like this. The diner remained frozen. One of the college kids had her phone halfway to her face, probably filming. Frank stood behind the counter with a coffee pot suspended in midair. Even the flickering neon sign outside seemed to pause. Mira could feel everyone staring, feel their shock radiating across the room like heat. Boss, one of Victor's men stepped forward, his voice tight with confusion. That table by the… I'm fine here, Dmitri. Victor didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The man stepped back immediately. Myra's soup had gone cold. She stared down at it, afraid to look at the man beside her, afraid to look at anyone. Her mind raced through possibilities, each worse than the last. Had she seen something she shouldn't have? Was this about that night 2 weeks ago, when she'd witnessed those men fighting behind the warehouse? But she'd run, kept her mouth shut, told no one. You should eat, Victor said calmly, as if they were old friends sharing a meal. It's late. He gestured to Frank, who nearly dropped the coffee pot rushing over. 2 coffees.
Black.
And Victor glanced at Myra's soup, then up at the menu board. Bring her the chicken sandwich. And fries. I can't, Myra started. You just finished a double shift. Victor's eyes met hers for the first time and she froze. They weren't cruel eyes. They weren't the eyes of the monster from the stories. They were tired eyes. Old eyes in a young face. You need to eat more than soup. How did he know about her shift? Thunder cracked outside, making Myra jump. Victor didn't flinch. He simply pulled out his phone and began scrolling through it, as casual as if he were sitting in his own home rather than a rundown diner next to a terrified single mother. One of the college kids whispered something. Another laughed nervously. Victor's head turned slightly in their direction. Not a full look, just a slight shift, and they immediately fell silent, suddenly fascinated by their drinks. Myra's hands shook as she picked up her spoon again. She didn't want the food he'd ordered. She didn't want to be here, in this booth, next to this man who could probably end her life with a single word. But she also didn't know how to leave. Frank brought the coffee with hands that trembled so badly the cups rattled against the saucers. He set them down and practically ran back to the counter. I don't understand, Myra whispered, finally finding her voice. Why are you? Do I need a reason to sit in a diner? Victor asked, still looking at his phone. People like you don't sit with people like me. For the first time, something flickered across his face. Not quite a smile. Something sadder. No, he said quietly. I suppose they don't. The rain continued its assault on the windows, and Myra sat frozen in the corner booth next to the most dangerous man in the city, wondering if she'd still be alive when the storm finally ended. The chicken sandwich arrived 6 minutes later. Myra hadn't touched it. It sat on the plate between them like evidence of something she couldn't understand. Victor had finished his coffee in silence, his phone now face down on the table. His men stood by the door, statues in expensive suits, watching everyone and no one at the same time. You're not eating, Victor observed. I'm not hungry, a lie. Her stomach had been growling for hours. You were hungry enough for a $3 soup. Heat crept up Myra's neck. She hated that he'd noticed. Hated that he knew the price. Hated sitting here under the weight of everyone's stares while this man, this dangerous, powerful man, acted like they were having a normal conversation. Why are you really here? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Victor was quiet for a moment. Then he reached for his own coffee cup, even though it was empty, and turned it slowly between his hands. I needed somewhere quiet to think. You own half the city. You could think anywhere. True, he set the cup down. But I chose here. Across the diner, one of Victor's men, the one he'd called Dmitri, shifted uncomfortably. He caught Victor's eye and gave the smallest shake of his head, clearly confused and concerned. Victor's jaw tightened, but he didn't move. Myra watched this exchange and felt her anxiety spike. Even his own people didn't understand what was happening, which meant she definitely didn't. Boss, we should. Dmitri started. We're fine, Dmitri. Victor's tone hadn't changed, but something in it made the man close his mouth immediately. Myra's fingers twisted the paper napkin in her lap, shredding it into tiny pieces. Outside, lightning split the sky, briefly illuminating the empty street. In that flash of light, she saw something else, a black car parked across the street, its windows too dark to see through. Eat, Victor said again, pushing the plate slightly toward her.
Please.
There was something in that last word. Something that made it less of a command and more of a request. Mira looked at the sandwich, then at him, then at the sandwich again. Her hands were still shaking when she picked it up. It was the best thing she'd tasted in months. She ate slowly, trying to maintain some dignity, but she was so hungry that dignity felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. Victor watched the rain, giving her space to eat without his eyes on her. For that small mercy, she was grateful. Then the drunk man ruined everything. He'd been sitting at the counter for the past half hour, nursing the same beer Frank probably shouldn't have served him. Now he slid off his stool with the exaggerated care of someone who knew they were unsteady. "Hey," he called out, his words slurring. "Hey, lady." Myra's stomach dropped. She kept her eyes on her plate. "I'm talking to you, sweetheart." He moved closer, his steps uneven. "You think you're something special now? Getting bought dinner by some rich guy?" "Sir, please sit down," Frank said weakly from behind the counter. The drunk ignored him. He was 5 feet from their booth now, swaying slightly. "What did you do to earn that sandwich, huh? What did you promise him?" Myra's face burned. She wanted to disappear, to melt into the torn vinyl and cease to exist. Victor stood up. He didn't stand quickly. There was no sudden movement, no aggression in the action. He simply rose from his seat with a kind of fluid control that made the temperature in the room drop 10 degrees. The drunk stopped mid-step. Victor didn't say a word. He just looked at the man. That was all. Just looked. But it was the kind of look that contained oceans of violence. The kind that promised consequences without needing to threaten them aloud. The kind that made you understand, deep in your primitive brain, that you were standing in front of a predator, and you were very, very small. The drunk's face went pale. His mouth worked soundlessly. "Apologize to the lady," Victor said softly. "Then leave." I'm sorry, The man stumbled backward, nearly falling. "I didn't mean He scrambled for the door, pushing past Victor's men so roughly that one of them had to sidestep. The bell chimed violently as he burst out into the rain. The diner remained silent. Victor sat back down, smoothing his jacket as if nothing had happened. He picked up his empty coffee cup again, realized it was still empty, and set it back down. His expression hadn't changed. He could have been reading the weather report. But Mira was staring at him now, her sandwich forgotten. Her heart pounded so hard, she could feel it in her throat. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. Victor finally looked at her. Really looked at her. And for just a moment, something flickered in those cold eyes. Something almost human. "Yes," he said quietly. "I did." Behind them, through the rain-streaked window, that black car across the street hadn't moved. Inside it, someone adjusted a camera lens capturing everything. Mira left 20 minutes later. Victor had insisted she finish eating, and for reasons she couldn't explain, she'd obeyed. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was the fact that the sandwich was real food, and she'd learned long ago not to waste real food. Either way, she'd eaten in silence while he scrolled through his phone, and the diner slowly remembered how to breathe again. Now she stood at the bus stop outside, her thin jacket doing nothing against the cold rain. The last bus would come in 8 minutes. She timed it perfectly, the way she timed everything in her life, down to the minute, down to the dollar. Through the diner window, she could see Victor still sitting there. His men had joined him now, leaning in close, talking. One of them gestured toward where she stood. Victor shook his head. Mira looked away quickly. The street was empty except for puddles and the occasional car passing by. The neon signs from closed shops reflected in the water, red, blue, green, painting the night in colors that seemed too bright for this forgotten part of the city. Her phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Patterson. "Can you come earlier tomorrow? 8 a.m. instead of 10. Earlier meant less sleep. But earlier also meant she might finish in time to pick up Leo herself instead of asking the neighbor. Myra's fingers flew across the cracked screen. Yes, no problem. She didn't notice the black car until it started moving. It pulled away from its spot across from the diner, headlights cutting through the rain. For a moment, Mira thought it would drive past. Instead, it slowed as it approached the bus stop. The windows were tinted so dark they looked like mirrors reflecting the stormy night. Myra's breath caught. She took a step back, closer to the street lamp. The car stopped. Her hand went to her purse, fingers finding the small canister of pepper spray she'd bought at the dollar store. It was probably expired, but it was all she had. The car sat there for 5 seconds.
10.
15. Then it drove away, turning the corner and disappearing into the rain. Mira released a breath she hadn't known she was holding. Her hands were shaking again. She was being paranoid. Had to be. Just a car. Just someone lost or waiting for someone. Nothing to do with her. But when she glanced back at the diner, Victor was standing now. He'd moved to the window, and he was looking in the direction the car had gone. Even from here, she could see the tension in his shoulders. He'd seen it too. Inside the diner, Dmitri appeared beside Victor, saying something urgent. Victor's jaw tightened. He pulled out his phone and made a call, his other hand pressed against the window as he watched the street. "Boss, that car." Dmitri's voice carried slightly through the glass. Victor cut him off with a gesture. He was still on the phone, speaking rapidly in what sounded like Russian. His free hand had curled into a fist. The bus appeared around the corner, its headlights like salvation. Mira had never been so happy to see the 47 in her entire life. She practically ran toward it as it pulled up, the doors hissing open. "Rough night?" the driver asked as she climbed aboard. "You have no idea," Mira muttered, feeding her fare into the machine. She collapsed into a seat near the back, pressing her forehead against the cold window. The bus pulled away from the curb, and she watched the diner shrink in the distance. Victor was still standing at the window, his phone to his ear, watching her bus disappear into the night. Victor ended the call and turned to his men. "That was Anton's crew," Dmitri said, his voice tight. "I'm sure of it. They've been following us all night." "Not us," Victor's voice was ice. "Following me to see where I go, who I meet. Why would they care about?" Dmitri stopped, understanding dawning on his face. "The woman." Victor said nothing. He was already running through scenarios, calculating risks, measuring consequences. Anton Volkov had been testing boundaries for months, pushing into territories that didn't belong to him. This was another test, another push. But this time, he'd involved an innocent. "Find out who she is," Victor said quietly. "Everything. Where she lives, where she works, if she has family. I want to know within the hour. Boss, if Anton thinks she matters to you, then we make sure nothing happens to her." Victor's voice was final. "And Dmitri? Do it quietly. She can't know we're watching." Dmitri nodded and pulled out his phone, already making calls. Victor turned back to the window, watching the rain. Somewhere in this city, a single mother was riding a bus home, completely unaware that her life had just become infinitely more complicated. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out something he'd carried for 15 years, a faded blue scarf, worn soft with time. He ran his thumb across the fabric, remembering a subway platform, remembering blood and kindness, and the face of a young woman who'd asked nothing in return. "I told you I don't forget," he whispered to the empty air. Across the street, in a parking garage 3 blocks away, 2 men in a black car reviewed their photos. One of them smiled. "Viktor Ivanov has a girlfriend," he said, already dialing his boss. "Anton is going to love this." Myra's alarm went off at 5:47 a.m. She'd slept 4 hours, maybe less. Dreams had chased her through the night. Dark cars, cold eyes, a sandwich she couldn't afford. She slapped the alarm silent and lay there for a moment, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that looked like a dragon if you tilted your head right. Leo would sleep for another hour. That gave her time to shower, get dressed, maybe swallow some toast before heading to Mrs. Patterson's house. The apartment was cold. The radiator had been making threatening sounds for a week, and Mira was terrified to call the landlord because calling the landlord meant reminding him she existed, and reminding him she existed meant he might remember the rent was late. Again. She showered in 4 minutes. Hot water cost money, and dressed in the bathroom so the steam would warm her up. Jeans, a clean shirt, her only decent sweater. The mirror was fogged, which was a blessing. She didn't want to see the dark circles under her eyes. In the kitchen, she found Leo's lunchbox and started packing. Peanut butter sandwich, an apple from the discount bin that only had one soft spot, a juice box from the food bank. Not much, but it would get him through the day. Her phone buzzed. Mrs. Patterson. Don't forget the windows today. Company coming tonight. Mira closed her eyes and counted to 5. Windows meant extra time. Extra time meant she might be late picking up Leo. Late meant the after-school program would charge her another fee she couldn't afford. She typed back, no problem.
See you at 8.
By 7:15, she was out the door, kissing Leo goodbye where he still slept in his small bed surrounded by library books and a stuffed dinosaur missing one eye. She locked 3 locks, the original, the deadbolt, and the chain she'd installed herself, and headed down 4 flights of stairs because the elevator had been broken since July. The morning was gray and damp, leftover rain puddling in the street. Mira walked 6 blocks to the bus stop, her hands shoved deep in her pockets. She didn't notice the man in the coffee shop across the street, watching her over his newspaper. Mrs. Patterson's house was in the kind of neighborhood where people had driveways and lawns, where the trash cans were hidden behind neat fences, and the mailboxes all matched. Mira took the bus 40 minutes to get here, transferring twice, just to clean toilets and dust shelves for $20 an hour under the table. You're late, Mrs. Patterson said when she opened the door. Mira checked her phone.
7:58 morgens.
I'm 2 minutes early. Well, you should arrive 5 minutes early. That's professional. Mrs. Patterson was already walking away, her silk robe swishing behind her. Remember windows. And the guest bathroom. Sherry and Tom are coming for dinner, and I won't have them thinking I live in squalor. The house was 3,000 square feet of the opposite of squalor. Mira tied her hair back and got to work. She was scrubbing the second-floor windows when she saw him. A man stood on the sidewalk across the street, dark jacket, watching the house. At first, Mira thought he might be a neighbor out for a walk. But he wasn't walking. He was just standing there. Her stomach twisted. She moved to the next window, telling herself she was being paranoid. When she looked again 5 minutes later, he was gone. Relief washed over her.
See?
Paranoid. Just someone waiting for a ride or...
Her phone rang.
Unknown number. Mira almost didn't answer. But unknown numbers sometimes meant work, and she couldn't afford to miss opportunities. Hello. Silence. Then breathing. Hello, she said again. The line went dead. Mira stared at her phone, her heart racing. Wrong number. Had to be. She went back to the windows, but her hands were shaking now, and she had to wipe the same spot 3 times. At noon, she took her lunch break sitting on Mrs. Patterson's back porch. Peanut butter sandwich. She'd made 2 this morning, 1 for Leo and 1 for herself. She was halfway through it when Mrs. Patterson's voice drifted through the kitchen window. Yes, someone was asking about my cleaning lady. No, I don't know why. A very well-dressed man, actually. Offer me $100 just to confirm her name and schedule. Can you imagine? Mira froze, sandwich halfway to her mouth. Of course I told him, Mrs. Patterson continued. I mean $100 for 30 seconds of conversation? I'm not stupid, Sherry. Yes, I know it's odd. But what's he going to do, rob a maid? The laughter that followed made Myra's blood run cold. She stood up slowly, her appetite gone. Through the kitchen window, she could see Mrs. Patterson at the counter, phone pressed to her ear, completely oblivious to what she'd just done. Mira pulled out her phone with trembling fingers and checked the time. 12:14 p.m. Leo's school let out at 3:30. She had 3 hours and 16 minutes to figure out what to do. Her phone buzzed. Another unknown number. This time, she didn't answer. Outside, a black car drove slowly past Mrs. Patterson's house, and Mira watched it go, finally understanding that last night at the diner had been the beginning of something she couldn't escape. Mira left Mrs. Patterson's house at 2:47 p.m. She'd finished the windows in record time, her mind racing too fast to focus on anything except Leo. She needed to get to him early. Needed to see him, hold him, make sure he was safe. Mrs. Patterson had paid her $20 short, claiming Mira had missed a spot in the downstairs bathroom, but Mira didn't argue. She just took the cash and left, practically running to the bus stop. The ride back felt like it took hours. Every car that pulled up behind the bus made her flinch. Every dark-colored sedan made her heart jump into her throat. She was being ridiculous. Paranoid. But she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. By the time she reached Leo's school, her shirt was damp with nervous sweat despite the cool air. The building was old brick, surrounded by a chain-link fence that was supposed to make parents feel secure, but mostly just made the place look like a prison. Kids poured out of the double doors, shouting and laughing, their backpacks bouncing. Mira spotted Leo immediately, small for 7, dark hair sticking up in the back where he always forgot to brush it. He was talking to another boy, probably about dinosaurs. Always dinosaurs.
Leo, she called out.
His face lit up when he saw her.
Mom.
You're early. Surprise, she hugged him tight, maybe too tight because he squirmed after a few seconds. Can't breathe, Mom. Sorry, baby, she pulled back, scanning the street over his head. Normal. Everything looked normal. Parents picking up kids. A crossing guard stopping traffic. The ice cream truck playing its tinny music 2 blocks away. Can we get ice cream? Leo asked, following her gaze. Not today. Maybe this weekend. You always say this weekend. Because this weekend, I might actually mean it, she took his hand. Come on. Let's go to the market. I need tomatoes for dinner. The market was 4 blocks away, an open-air collection of stalls where vendors sold everything from vegetables to knockoff watches. Mira came here because the produce was cheap, and if you came near closing time, sometimes they'd throw an extra because they didn't want to haul it back. They were at the vegetable stand, Leo examining every tomato like he was selecting precious gems, when Mira felt it again. That watched feeling. She turned slowly, scanning the crowd. Family shopping. An old woman arguing with a vendor about the price of lettuce. A young couple holding hands. A man in a dark jacket standing by the spice stall, looking at his phone. The same jacket from Mrs. Patterson Street. Myra's breath caught. She grabbed Leo's hand. We're leaving. But you said.
Now, Leo.
Something in her voice made him stop arguing. They abandoned the tomatoes and started walking quickly through the market, weaving between stalls. Mira kept looking back. The man was following, not even trying to hide it now. Mom, you're hurting my hand. I'm sorry, baby. Just stay close. They broke out onto the main street. Mira pulled Leo toward the bus stop, her mind racing. Should she run? Should she scream? What did these people want? Was this about Victor? It had to be about Victor, but why? She'd just sat next to him. Just accepted a sandwich. That couldn't be enough, too. 2 men stepped out from between parked cars, blocking their path. Mira stopped so fast Leo bumped into her. Mrs. Chun, one of them said. He was younger than the other, maybe 30, with a scar across his left eyebrow. We just want to talk. I don't know you, Myra's voice shook. She pulled Leo behind her. But you know Victor Ivanov, the second man smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made Myra's stomach turn. We saw you together. Looked pretty cozy. I don't, that was nothing. I don't even know him. Then you won't mind coming with us to discuss it. The man with the scar reached out. Mira screamed. She didn't think about it, didn't plan it. She just screamed as loud as she could, the sound ripping from her throat and echoing off the buildings. People turned. Stared. The man grabbed her purse instead, yanking it so hard the strap broke. Mira stumbled forward, Leo crying behind her. Mom, it's okay, baby, it's... A black car screeched to a halt beside them, so close Mira felt the heat from its engine. Two men got out, different men, these ones in suits, and suddenly the men who'd taken her purse were backing away. Mr. Ivanov sends his regards, one of the suited men said calmly. He held out Myra's purse. The two attackers were already running, disappearing into the crowd. Mira stood frozen, Leo clutching her leg, surrounded by staring strangers while a man in an expensive suit handed her back her broken purse like he was returning a lost wallet. "You should go home, Mrs. Chun," the man said. "We'll make sure you get there safely." "I don't understand what's happening." Tears burned in Myra's eyes. "I don't understand any of this." The man's expression softened slightly. "Mr. Ivanov will explain. Tonight. He'll come to you."
No.
"No, I don't want." "You don't have a choice anymore," he nodded toward Leo, who was crying into her shirt. "Neither of you do."
I'm sorry.
He got back in the car and it pulled away slowly, pacing them as they walked. Mira held Leo's hand and tried not to cry, tried not to think about how her simple life, her careful, quiet, invisible life, had shattered in less than 24 hours. All because a dangerous man had decided to sit next to her in a diner. They made it home by 4:30 p.m. Leo had stopped crying, but he hadn't let go of Myra's hand the entire walk to their building. The black car had followed them for 2 blocks before disappearing, and somehow that was worse than if it had stayed. Now Mira didn't know if they were still being watched or not. "Mom, who were those men?" Leo asked as they climbed the stairs. The elevator was still broken. "Just some confused people, baby. They scared me." "I know." "Me too." She unlocked all 3 locks with shaking hands. "But we're safe now. Why don't you go watch TV? I'll make us grilled cheese." Leo hesitated at the living room doorway, looking smaller than his 7 years. "Are they going to come back?" Mira knelt down, forcing herself to smile.
No.
"Everything's going to be fine." The lie tasted bitter. She made grilled cheese on autopilot, her mind spinning through impossible options. She could run, pack a bag, take Leo, and disappear.
But where?
She had $147 in her bank account and no car. She could call the police. And tell them what? That a mafia boss had bought her dinner and now people were following her? They'd laugh her out of the station. She was trapped. At 6:15 p.m., someone knocked on the door. Mira froze at the stove, spatula in hand. Leo looked up from his cartoon. "Don't move," she whispered to him. The knock came again, firmer this time. Mira crept to the door, her heart hammering. She looked through the peephole and saw 2 men in dark suits standing in her hallway. Behind them, her neighbor Mrs. Rodriguez was peeking out of her own apartment, her eyes wide with curiosity and fear. "Mrs. Chun," one of the men spoke directly to the door. "We're not here to hurt you. Mr. Ivanov is downstairs. He'd like to speak with you. Go away." Myra's voice cracked. "Ma'am, please. He's trying to help." "I don't want his help. I want you all to leave me alone."
A pause.
Then a different voice, deeper and calmer. A voice she recognized from the diner. "Mira." Victor was right outside her door. "I know you're frightened," he continued. "You have every right to be. But we need to talk. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. You did this." Mira shouted through the door. "Those men came after us because of you." "I know." The simple admission stunned her into silence. "I know this is my fault," Victor said quietly. "And I'm trying to fix it. But I need you to let me in." "Mom?" Leo had appeared behind her, dinosaur clutched to his chest. "Go to your room, Leo." "But..."
Now.
He ran, and she heard his bedroom door close. Mira pressed her forehead against the door, her hands flat against the wood. Every instinct screamed at her not to open it. Once she opened it, there would be no going back. Whatever small safety she'd managed to build would be gone forever. But it was already gone, wasn't it? She opened the door. Victor stood in her shabby hallway, looking completely out of place in his tailored suit. His 2 men flanked him, but he waved them back. They retreated to the stairs, giving them space. Up close, in the harsh fluorescent light, Mira could see details she'd missed at the diner. The small scar above his left eyebrow. The way his jaw was set, like he was perpetually braced for a fight. The exhaustion around his eyes that matched her own. "May I come in?" he asked. "Do I have a choice?"
Yes.
"You always have a choice." Mira stepped back. Victor entered, and she closed the door behind him, leaving the chain off. What was the point? If he wanted to hurt her, a chain wouldn't stop him. He looked around her tiny apartment, the peeling wallpaper, the second-hand furniture, the toys scattered across the floor. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes.
Pity?
Recognition? She couldn't tell. "Your son?" he asked, nodding toward the closed bedroom door. "You stay away from him. I have no interest in children, Mira. Only in keeping both of you safe." "Safe from what?" "From who?" She wrapped her arms around herself. "I don't understand any of this. I sat next to you. That's all. I just sat next to you and ate a sandwich, and now people are following me and grabbing me on the street and—" "I know," Victor's voice was steady, controlled. "When I sat with you at the diner, I made you visible. My rivals saw us together. They think you matter to me. But I don't. I'm nobody. To them, you're leverage. A way to hurt me." He paused. "They were testing you today, seeing if you were protected. Now they know you are." "I don't want to be protected." Myra's voice rose. "I want my normal life back. I want to work and pick up my son and not worry about men in suits following us." "That life is over." The bluntness of it hit her like a slap. "I'm sorry, but it is."
They know who you are now.
"Where you live. Where your son goes to school." Myra's legs gave out. She sank onto the couch, her head in her hands. Victor remained standing, maintaining his distance. "I can keep you safe. Both of you. But you have to let me."
Why?
She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "Why do you even care? You don't know me." Victor was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out something blue. A scarf. Faded and worn. 15 years ago, he said softly, I was 19. Bleeding on a subway platform after a fight went wrong. Everyone walked past me. Except one person. A young woman. She gave me this scarf to stop the bleeding. Asked if I was okay. Waited with me until I could stand. He looked at Mira. She had kind eyes. The kind of eyes that see people instead of problems. Myra's breath caught. A subway platform. Years ago. She'd been 18, on her way to her first real job interview. There'd been a boy bleeding, and she'd. That was you? That was me. Victor folded the scarf carefully. You never asked my name. Never asked for anything. You just helped because you could. He met her eyes. I don't forget debts, Mira. Especially not ones that saved my life. Outside, a car alarm went off. Leo's TV chattered in the other room. And Mira sat in her worn-out apartment, realizing that 15 years ago, she'd shown kindness to a stranger, and now that stranger was the only thing standing between her son and danger. I can't afford your protection, she whispered. You already paid for it, Victor said. Years ago. With a blue scarf and 5 minutes of human decency. He moved toward the door, then paused. My men will be watching. You won't see them, but they'll be there. Don't leave the city. Don't change your routine drastically. And Mira? He looked back at her. Lock your door. All 3 locks. Then he was gone, and Mira was alone with the weight of a 15-year-old kindness that had just become the most dangerous thing she'd ever done. 2 days passed in careful normalcy. Mira went to work, picked up Leo, made dinner, pretended everything was fine. She never saw Victor's men, but sometimes she'd catch a flash of a dark car on the corner. A man reading a newspaper who'd been on the same street for 2 hours. Small signs that she was being watched. Protected, she reminded herself. Not stalked. Protected. It didn't feel much different. Leo had a school event on Thursday night, some kind of science fair, where the kids showed off projects made from cardboard and glue. He'd built a volcano that actually erupted, and he'd talked about nothing else for 3 days. You're coming, right, Mom? He'd asked that morning, his eyes wide and hopeful. Wouldn't miss it for the world, baby. Now she stood outside the school at 6:47 p.m., watching parents file out with their kids. The event had been cute, lots of baking soda explosions and poorly painted solar systems. Leo's volcano had been a hit. He clutched his participation ribbon like it was an Olympic gold medal. "Can we get pizza to celebrate?" he asked. Mira calculated quickly. She had $23 until Friday. Pizza was $12. That left $11 for everything else. "Sure," she said, because a smile was worth more than $11 of worry. "Let's go." The street was quieter than usual. Most families had driven, their cars already gone. A few stragglers remained, but they were heading in the opposite direction. Mira held Leo's hand and started walking toward the bus stop 3 blocks away. She made it 2 blocks before she realized something was wrong. The street was too empty. The bodega on the corner that always stayed open was dark. And that same black car, not Victor's, a different one, was driving too slowly behind them. "Mom?" Leo sensed her tension. "It's okay. Keep walking." But it wasn't okay. Every instinct she had was screaming. She picked up the pace, pulling Leo along. 1 more block to the bus stop. 1 more block to light and people, and a van screeched around the corner ahead of them, cutting off their path. Mira stopped dead. Behind them, the black cars stopped too, blocking their retreat. "Run," she screamed, pulling Leo toward the nearest alley. They made it 5 steps before 2 men jumped out of the van. One of them grabbed Myra's arm, yanking her back so hard she fell. Her knee cracked against the pavement.
Leo, run.
But Leo didn't run. He tried to kick the man holding his mother, his small fists swinging uselessly. "Feisty kid," the man laughed. He was huge, with a shaved head and a tattoo snaking up his neck. Anton like that. The second man, thinner, with cold eyes, reached for Leo. Mira lunged.
She didn't think.
She just moved, throwing herself between the man and her son. Her nails raked across his face, drawing blood. He swore and backhanded her. The world exploded in stars and pain. "Mom!" Leo's scream was pure terror. Through blurred vision, Mira saw the thin man grab Leo by his backpack, lifting him off the ground. Leo thrashed and kicked, crying, reaching for her. "No!" Mira tried to stand, but the big man shoved her down. "This is what happens," he told her almost conversationally, "when you're stupid enough to matter to Viktor Ivanov. Tell him Anton says hello." He started dragging her toward the van. Leo was already inside, still screaming. Mira fought with everything she had, but it wasn't enough. It was never enough. She was a single mom who worked 2 jobs, and these were trained criminals, and gunshots cracked through the air. Not aimed at anyone. Aimed up into the sky. Warning shots. The big man dropped Mira. Both attackers spun around. 3 black SUVs had appeared from nowhere, blocking both ends of the street. Men in suits poured out, moving with military precision. And from the center vehicle, Victor emerged. He didn't run.
Didn't shout.
He just walked toward them with a cold fury that made the temperature drop. "Let the boy go," Victor said quietly. The thin man still had Leo. He pulled out a knife, holding it near Leo's face. Not another step, Ivanov or the kid. Victor moved faster than Mira thought possible. One moment, he was 10 feet away. The next, his hand was wrapped around the man's wrist, bending it at an angle that made the man scream. The knife clattered to the ground. Leo fell, and one of Victor's men caught him before he hit the pavement. The big man tried to run. He made it 3 steps before 2 of Victor's men tackled him. It was over in seconds. Victor knelt beside Leo, his voice gentle in a way Mira had never heard.
"Hey.
You're safe now. Let's get you to your mom." He carried Leo over to where Mira was struggling to stand. Blood ran from her split lip. Her knees screamed in pain. But none of that mattered when Leo crashed into her arms, sobbing. "I've got you," she whispered into his hair. "I've got you, baby. You're safe." Victor stood over them, his suit jacket torn, his knuckles bleeding. Behind him, his men were restraining the attackers. Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had called the police. They were going to take him, Mira said, her voice hollow. They were going to take my son. I know, Victor's jaw was tight. I told you they'd come. I'm sorry I wasn't here sooner. How did you? My men lost track of you. For 3 minutes. 3 minutes, he looked furious with himself. That's all it took. Leo pulled back from Mira, looking at Victor with wide, tear-stained eyes. You saved me. Victor's expression softened. Your mom saved you first. I just helped. Police cars screeched to a halt. Officers jumped out, hands on their weapons, taking in the scene, the men being restrained, the van, Victor standing over a mother and child. Mr. Ivanov, one officer said carefully. We'll need statements. Take theirs, Victor gestured to the attackers. The woman and child are going home. Sir, they're witnesses. Are you really going to force a terrified 7-year-old to relive his trauma tonight? Victor's voice could have frozen fire. They'll come to the station tomorrow. With their lawyer. The officer hesitated, then nodded. Victor looked down at Mira. Can you walk? I don't know. He didn't ask permission. He simply scooped Leo up in one arm and helped Mira to her feet with the other, supporting most of her weight. They walked to his car together, this strange trio bound by violence and old debts. As they drove away, Mira looked back to see the police loading the attackers into cruisers. One of them, the thin man, caught her eye and smiled. Even in handcuffs, even defeated, he smiled. And Mira realized with cold certainty that this wasn't over. It was just beginning. 1 week later, rain fell on the city again. Mira sat in the same corner booth at the diner, the one with the torn vinyl seat that nobody wanted. But tonight, she wasn't alone. Leo sat beside her, coloring on the paper placemat with crayons Frank had given him. His participation ribbon was pinned to his jacket. He refused to take it off. Outside, a dark sedan sat at the curb. 2 of Victor's men inside, always watching. Mira had stopped pretending she didn't see them. Stopped pretending her life was normal. Normal had died in a dark street a week ago. Can I get the chocolate pancakes? Leo asked, not looking up from his drawing. It's dinner time, baby. But we're celebrating. Celebrating what? Leo finally looked up, his expression serious beyond his years. Being alive. Myra's throat tightened. The therapist Victor had insisted on paying for said Leo was handling the trauma well, but sometimes he said things like this. Things that proved he understood more than a 7-year-old should. Okay, she whispered. Chocolate pancakes it is. The diner door opened, and the bell chimed. Myra's hand instinctively moved to Leo's shoulder, ready to pull him close. But it was just an elderly couple, shaking rain from their umbrella. She forced herself to relax. Victor's men had dismantled Anton Volkov's operation in 6 days. It had been surgical, brutal, and, according to the news reports, completely legal. Somehow Victor had gotten the police to raid Anton's warehouses, had gotten the FBI to investigate his money laundering, had burned his empire to ash, without firing a single shot himself. The thin man who'd grabbed Leo was facing 20 years. The big one, 15. Anton himself had disappeared, fled the country, Victor said, and wouldn't be coming back. You're safe now, Victor had told her 3 days ago. All of you. But Mira still flinched at every car door. Still checked under Leo's bed before he went to sleep. Still woke up at 3 a.m. in a cold sweat, remembering her son's screams. The bell chimed again. This time it was Victor. He entered alone, no entourage, just a man in a dark coat with rain in his hair. His eyes found hers immediately across the diner. He nodded to his men outside, some silent communication, and they drove away. Frank appeared with coffee before Victor even sat down. Mr. Ivanov, Frank's hands didn't shake anymore. After what Victor had done for Mira, after the story had spread through the neighborhood, Frank treated him like a hero. The usual? Just coffee tonight, Frank. Thank you. Victor slid into the booth across from Mira and Leo. Up close, he looked tired. There were new lines around his eyes, and his knuckles were still bruised. "Hi," Leo said, looking up from his drawing. "Hello, Leo. What are you making?" "A T-Rex eating pizza." Leo held up the drawing. It was exactly that, a green dinosaur with an enormous slice of pizza in its mouth. "That's very creative. Mom says I can get chocolate pancakes." "Then you absolutely should." Leo grinned and went back to coloring. Victor's eyes met Myra's over her son's head, and something passed between them. Gratitude. Exhaustion. Understanding. "You didn't have to come," Mira said quietly. "I wanted to." "Why?" Victor was quiet for a moment, turning his coffee cup between his hands. "Because this is where it started. Seemed right to come back." Frank appeared with Leo's chocolate pancakes, piled high with whipped cream. Leo's eyes went wide with delight, and for a moment, he was just a 7-year-old boy again, not a child who'd faced monsters in the dark. "You're good with him," Victor observed. "He's my whole world." "I can see that." Victor looked out the window at the rain. "Anton won't come back. His associates know what happens if they touch you. You're truly safe now." "Am I?" Myra's voice was barely a whisper. "Because I keep wondering when the next threat will come. The next person who wants to hurt you by hurting us." "There won't be one." "How can you promise that?" Victor turned back to her, and she saw something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Vulnerability. "Because I'm making changes. Stepping back from certain operations. Becoming legitimate. Or as legitimate as someone like me can be." He paused. "What happened to Leo?" That was a line I didn't know I had until someone crossed it. "I won't let it happen again. To anyone." Mira studied him. This man who'd turned her life upside down, who'd brought danger to her door, and then burned down anyone who'd tried to hurt her son. Who'd carried a scarf for 15 years because a stranger had been kind. "I still don't understand you," she said. "That's fair. I barely understand myself." He pulled out the blue scarf from his jacket pocket. He always seemed to have it, and set it on the table between them. "But I understand debts. And I understand that some people matter more than power or territory or fear." Like the girl on the subway. Like the woman in the diner. His eyes held hers. "You showed me kindness when I was nobody. You didn't ask who I was or what I'd done. You just saw someone who needed help. That's just being human. In my world, that's revolutionary." Leo, oblivious to the weight of the conversation, announced through a mouthful of pancakes, "This is the best dinner ever." Mira laughed despite everything. Despite the fear and the pain and the impossibility of her situation. She laughed because her son was alive and eating chocolate pancakes, and sometimes that was enough. Victor smiled, a real smile, small and genuine. "He's right.
It is."
Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing the streets clean. The diner glowed warm against the darkness, a small pocket of safety in a dangerous city. Victor's men returned, parking discreetly down the block. Life moved forward, careful and changed, but moving nonetheless. "What happens now?" Mira asked. Victor considered the question. "Now? You live your life, work your jobs, raise your son, and maybe," he gestured to the booth, "maybe sometimes we have coffee. Just two people who understand debts and kindness." "Just coffee?" "Just coffee," he paused. "Unless you want the chocolate pancakes. I hear they're the best in the city." Mira looked at this man, this dangerous, powerful man who'd saved her son and carried a stranger's scarf for 15 years, who was trying, in his own complicated way, to be better than what the world expected. "Okay," she said softly.
"Coffee. Sometimes."
Leo looked up, whipped cream on his nose. "Can Mr. Victor come to my next science fair?" Victor's expression softened in that way it only did around Leo. "I wouldn't miss it." And in that moment, in a rundown diner during a rainstorm, 3 broken people sat together and pretended they weren't broken at all. Outside, the city hummed with danger and possibility. But inside, There was warmth and chocolate pancakes, and the quiet beginning of something that might eventually feel like hope. The rain fell. The coffee stayed hot. And Mira Chin, poor single mom who'd once been ignored and eating alone, learned that sometimes kindness echoes across years in ways you never expect. Sometimes it saves you. And sometimes it saves everyone.